Good evening, family. Put a one up in the chat box if you can hear my voice clearly. Just put a number one in the chat box if you can hear me clearly. Awesome. Thank you, Abdul. All right. Thank you for everyone that jumped on the stream tonight to another live stream of Let's Talk About It. We have an interesting topic tonight. The topic tonight is really a topic that's often overlooked. I mean, when I tell you it's overlooked in relationships like you would not believe, because a lot of times it appears very innocent when it's being done, which is what gives reason for why it's overlooked as not really a big deal or something to even pay much attention to. A lot of times we pay attention to things in relationships that are really obvious, right in our face, such as domestic violence or verbal abuse. These are the kind of evident things that make you really right away pay attention to in a relationship. And As a result, other things tend to get overlooked. So we're gonna get right into it. You see the topic, ladies. Do you want a man to be masculine sometimes or all the time? I think many of you would probably say right off the bat, I want my man to be masculine all the time. I don't want him to act feminine anytime. And this is speaking more or less from a heterosexual standpoint. So there is obviously no judgment if you don't fit into that equation. But I'm speaking more or less from a heterosexual standpoint, and the question is directed to women who have men in their lives, either as their husband or their significant other, or even long-term relationship. Do you want your man to be masculine sometimes or all the time? Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of times when we communicate with one another, ladies, when you're at work, you talk to your female coworkers, right? You talk to your female friends, and you kind of tend to do what ladies do. You have this back and forth conversation. It kind of goes all over the place. You're talking about a lot of different topics. You may be talking either about someone, right? Or you are, or you're just simply talking about the job itself, which you either are in disagreement with or unhappy about in terms of how the job is either dealing with you, your pay rate, and you understand what I'm saying. It's a barrage of different conversations that you're having when you're at work, when you're amongst yourself with your female coworkers or friends, right? Even outside of work, when you go to the mall and you're with your girlfriends or your coworkers and you go out, you tend to have conversations that you guys seem to like. You're entertaining one another with the conversations that you both are okay with having. Now here's where the problem comes in at. A lot of times it's hard to disengage, or it's hard to detach yourself from the day-to-day conversations that you may be having with your coworkers or your friends when you're out and about, even when you're not working. And a lot of times these same conversations, the same kind of conversations that you were having at work, it tends to come home with you to your man. Either he's there when you get home, or he comes in after work later on and during that evening, night, morning, whatever shift he works. But you tend to then want to talk. But when you do begin to talk, you start to talk about the same kind of things that you were talking about with your girlfriends or with your female co-workers, right? Now, why is that really a problem? Well, I'll tell you why that's a problem. Many of you tend to talk to your husband or your man as if you're talking to your female friend or coworker, right? And understand this, we as men, we really don't care about this kind of communication. Why? Because we want to talk to you, and we want to talk to you alone. Many conversations are empty of the value that could be there as it relates to what men want to hear and or talk about. Now, ladies, you want to talk to your man like a man and not like your girlfriend. Why? Simply put, no long sentence, no long explanation. We're not interested. We're not interested. We're interested in what you have to say, but we're not necessarily interested in the conversations that would pertain or entertain you as a lady having a conversation with another female. And a lot of times you don't even realize you're doing it. You're kind of doing it, and then when he sits there and appears as though he's not paying attention, you may get a little irritated, like, you're not even paying me any attention, or you're not even listening to me. Well, I want to be honest with you, he's probably not. And I'm going to tell you what your voice sounds like when you're doing this. Listen, this is what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like to him. That's what it sounds like to him. Because he wants to talk to you, and he wants you to be able to disengage. He wants you to be able to disconnect, I should say, from what you've communicated with at home. And I'll tell you why this really becomes a problem. I'm making light of the subject, but I'll tell you something. It's really more serious than you realize. Because here's what happens. When you go week after week, month after month, year after year, unable to communicate effectively, and this is the kind of communication that you're having, you start to lose track of the conversations that you should be having that could benefit not only yourself, but it could benefit your whole entire relationship as well. Because believe me, there's things going on in his head, there's things going on in his mind, and there's things going on in yours as well. But a lot of times we tend to avoid the things that make us feel uncomfortable by talking about things that are a little less serious, I should say, or a little less important. We kind of try to skate over the conversations that make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. So what do? We go week after week, month after month, year after year, having these small, light-hearted conversations that really don't add any value whatsoever to the relationship itself. As a result, many things get swept under the rug over the years. Many conversations that could be had are not had. They're removed and they're swept under the rug. And they end up getting covered over and smothered with these small, unimportant conversations. Now, why is that really, really important? Communication problems is probably one of the most common factors that leads to divorce and the dissolving of what could be a meaningful relationship. And I'm telling you how serious it is. It's at a rate of about 65%. This is followed by a couple's inability to resolve issues, and this is at a 43% rate. Now, marriage or a long-term relationship without a healthy exchange of thoughts, feelings, emotions is unsustainable. You can't sustain that type of relationship. It's unsustainable over a long period of time, which will ultimately lead to your relationship going into what's called a dangerous territory. All right? Now, there's another type of lack of communication. It's called stonewalling. And any of you have ever heard that term, stonewalling? Put a number 2 in the box if you've ever heard the term stonewalling. Put a number 2 in the chat box if you ever heard the term stonewalling. It's called stonewalling. If you've ever heard it, and if you've never heard of that term, put a 3 in the chat box. If you've never heard of that. 2, okay. Margaret, I see you. You've heard of it. Now I'll tell you what stonewalling is. Stonewalling is a whole entirely different lack of communication. What is stonewalling? Stonewalling is when you completely shut down in a conversation and you refuse to interact with the other person. And you know, some of you ladies do that, especially if you get into it, you find yourself in an uncomfortable conversation with your husband or with your significant other. You find yourself stonewalling. Why? Because you really kind of don't want to deal with the subject. You don't want to deal with the conversation. You really kind of just want him to, go away, to end this conversation. So you do what's called stonewalling. Now, what will stonewalling do? Stonewalling has an entirely different, unheard message, unlike anything you could say out of your mouth verbally. Because now what you're telling him is that you don't care what he has to say. And likewise, This is what happens when you avoid meaningful conversations over a long, extended period of time. And so, to avoid conversations, again, like I said in the very beginning, that make you feel uncomfortable, you begin having conversations with your man as if you're talking to your girlfriend. These are very non-threatening, innocuous conversations, right? But you don't want him to engage with you, do you? Because remember, when you were having these conversations before, earlier during the day or during the weeks or over the months and years, you were having them usually with your girlfriend, right? Who were females. So do you want your man to be masculine sometimes? Or do you want him to be masculine all the time? Now that means if you want him to be masculine all the time, that means you want to find out what kind of conversations actually get his attention. What are those conversations? What are those conversations? And I'll tell you something. You're not at fault for falling into this kind of behavior, because I'll tell you something. If you've been with someone for a very long period of time, you kind of tend to take things for granted a lot of times, and conversations seem to take a back burner. Real conversation a lot of times seem to take a back burner, where by the time you begin to communicate, it's usually when something has gone completely awry. It's usually when something has gone really left. You know, it's really gotten bad. That's when you tend to try to communicate, but then the communication is not even healthy, it's toxic. So now you're throwing out insults and pejoratives and all kinds of shaming tactics and shaming terms, and that you know yourself in any relationship. For those of you that are in one right now, or for those of you that are looking to get into one and have previous relationships where you know this kind of communication was really not healthy at all to the relationship, you know that's not going to work. It's not going to bring about a good result overall in the long term. So we have to learn how to communicate with one another in a very healthy way. If you look at the word communicate, you see how closely related it is to the word community. It's something how community and communicate sound almost very, very similar. What does it mean? It means the equitable coming together of two sides, of two people or peoples coming together in unity, for the most part. That's why it's called community. Community. You got unity and you got commune in the word community. And it's funny that in the word communicate, you still got almost the word unity in the word communicate. So how closely similar are these two words, and how important are the two words together? How do they work together? They work together by you being able to have a healthy interaction with one another. Likewise, in your own community, you need a healthy interaction with one another to have a healthy community, right? Okay, so you want to make sure that your communication is where it needs to be, and it's on the levels that it needs to be, and it's had when it's necessary for it to be had. How important is that? That's so important. You'd be surprised how many relationships have dissolved simply because of communication or the lack thereof. Not being able to communicate in a healthy way. No one really willing to take accountability if something is brought to their attention. If the husband brings something to her attention and she doesn't want to take responsibility or accountability for it, instead of communicating in a healthy way, defense goes up, right? And insults begin to be thrown. Same thing with him sometimes. Bring something up, instead of him taking accountability or responsibility for what the concern is that she may have, immediately insults, immediately antagonistic statements are made, insults, shaming tactics are made. So this is something that happens on both sides. I will tell you that. But how important is it, ladies, if you being a wife, how important is it for you to really understand your role as it relates to communicating? It's extremely important, because you in the end are his helpmeet. You're his helpmeet, not his partner, not his sidekick, you know, not his none of those things. You're his helpmeet. That means whatever he's trying to do, and this is assuming that you've made a good decision. You're his helpmeet to get him to whatever goals or objectives he's trying to get to, because any good positive goals that he has or objectives, it's going to ultimately benefit you and the entire family as a whole. That's what makes your job so very important. So communication is paramount where you're concerned. Very, very paramount. You can either make his home hell or you can make it heaven. It depends on what decision you make. And communication is the first line of defense when it comes to creating those two dynamics in your house. So, you know, again, a lot of times when we came up in the homes that we came up in, we never learned what real good communication is. I know that. We didn't learn it. So we didn't see our parents a lot of times. Some of us did, but a lot of us did not. We didn't see our parents communicating in a healthy way. We saw a lot of toxic behavior. We saw a lot of domestic violence. We saw a whole lot of everything. You know, communication was at an all-time low for many of us when we were growing up. So for us to become good communicators in our relationship is something that we have to take a conscious, deliberate, and personal attempt at becoming very good at. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that's going to happen just by like abracadabra, you know. It's going to take some time, but it's going to take time that is that will be worth it if you're sincere about absolutely wanting to become a better communicator in your relationship. Communicating, a lot of times for us when we don't know how to communicate, what we tend to do is we forego real verbal communication, and then we find ourselves only able to communicate sexually. Yeah, that's what we end up doing. And then finally, that's why you notice in a lot of relationships, they may be very toxic. I mean, they may have really bad communication skills with one another. I mean, very, very toxic. Very insultive to one another, calling each other all kinds of names, like our grandparents used to say, or our parents used to tell us, calling you every name but the child of God. Right? You know, making up new profanity words to call you. Okay? So we've seen that. We've seen that when we were growing up. And we've also noticed that in a situation or relationship like that, a lot of times what we've seen is we've seen a lot of babies come right behind it. Ain't that something? They have a horrible communication between themselves, but it seems that she always ends up pregnant anyway. That tells you right there where they're medicating at. They're not trying to get better at communicating. Any uncomfortable situation is always resolved with sex. So what happens ultimately down the road, as time goes on, the relationship does what? It dissolves. It ultimately dissolves. Why? It's because of what I said earlier when we first started the stream. This kind of communication in a relationship is unsustainable. You can't sustain it. There's no way to maintain a relationship with that kind of toxic communication between yourselves, male and female. Since we're better together than we are apart, and we simply are, wouldn't you think it's important that you develop good communication skills? Right? It would make sense. I mean, if keeping the relationship is important, you would think that that would become one of the priorities in the relationship, since communication is the front line. You know, that's the front line. That's the front line when you first meet. That's the front line after you've already met. And that's the front line as you continue on in the relationship, because good communication is going to determine in the end whether you even stay together or not. Right? Bad communication does a few things. It causes you to misunderstand one another. It causes you to jump the gun. Or as we used to say, grab the horse by the tail and run with it. Right? If your communication is bad, it tends to cause you to assume things that were not necessarily true. If communication is bad, you take things wrong or you hear things wrong than how you should have heard it. See, that's when you know the two people don't have a congruent understanding about how both of them communicate. Therein lies the breakup in the relationship. There is no commune and there is no unity where there is no good communication. Very important. The thing is, the sad part about it is that if you have children, they learn the same bad behavior as it relates to communication. And then they don't know how to communicate either. They don't know how to communicate either. And then therein lies the cycle continuing over and over and over again. And where does that stop? Where does that stop? If we look in our community right now, we can see the effects of bad communication. We can see it everywhere we look. Everywhere we look, we can see the effects of bad communication. How often have you walked down the street in the summer and you seeing a young lady on the phone yelling loud? I mean loud. And you can tell she's talking to a man. But you can tell this is probably someone that she's involved with intimately. But pay attention to how she's talking. You know, you can hear him yelling a little bit through the phone, and you can hear her just, oh man, you can hear her yelling for 2 blocks. It's safe to say that that's probably how they communicate with one another when they're face to face. And this is just 1 or 2 individual examples that you've probably seen here and there. But imagine now this being a community issue. And it is a community issue. Like so many issues that you've heard me address on this stream. This is just one of the issues that become clear as to why we cannot seem to stay together in relationship. We really don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to communicate with our husbands. You don't know how to communicate with your man. You don't know how to communicate. A lot of times it becomes an ego issue. You know, you heard me mention sign language, shame, insult, guilt, and the need to be right. This type of behavior is pathology. It's pathological. It really is psychological. It's a mental program in a lot of ways, because most ladies who do not have a skill to communicate properly, no matter who they're talking to, it always leads to insults. It always leads to shaming tactics. It always leads to guilt tactics. And it always leads with the need to be right, meaning you're no longer listening to actually understand, you're listening to respond. And this is what happens when you have bad, very bad, toxic communication skills. You know? Now, in dealing with your man, when you do this, how do you expect him to respond? Do you expect him to be quiet and just kind of get docile and don't say anything? Well, that would be taking him out of his masculine, wouldn't it? But see, do you want your man to be masculine sometimes or all the time? And if you want him to be masculine all the time, then you have to be what? What's the opposite of masculine? You have to stay in your feminine, and you have to rest in your femininity. Femininity, being cooperative, being a good experience for your husband, which you've heard me mention so many times in the streams, comes about by good communication skills. It really does. Because, see, a woman who's wife material, she does not overtalk her man, which indicates bad communication skills. That's what that indicates. So for the outcomes that you want, for the outcomes that many of you ladies say you want, I mean, I could say I want Mercedes-Benz. What's going to determine whether I get it, though? I have to qualify. That means I have to meet the standards that qualifies me to own that vehicle. My credit has to be good. which means I have to do something to get my credit good. That means it comes with a series of activities that gets my credit good, enough for me to qualify for that vehicle. Then, even after I qualify, I still have to have what? I have to have money to put down. Depending on how high the credit rating is, will determine on whether I have to put money down or not. But either way it goes, you understand what I'm saying. It requires work. So in a relationship with communication, it also requires work. It requires work. It requires you to take it serious as to whether either you're communicating or you're not communicating effectively. See, here's another problem with the lack of communication in a relationship. It leads the other party to come to conclusions about things by way of the lack of communication about things that may not even necessarily be true. Right? I'll give you an example. If a husband never tells his wife, never, that he loves her, right? Do you think it's possible that over time she may come to the conclusion that what? That he doesn't, right? That may not necessarily be true. Why? Because he may be doing everything physically to show that he loves her and that he's concerned, that he cares about his family. But it's something about communicating it in words that's so very important. Communication is paramount. If you have a man, you should be praising your man. Yeah, every day. In fact, you shouldn't go to sleep until you do it. You should do it often, and you should do it daily. That's important. He is who you expect to go out, kill the wolf, tackle the bear, and bring the meat home, right? That's what you expect. Unless you don't want a man. If you don't want one, okay, well, then that probably won't apply to you. But if that's what you want, then you want to make sure that he knows that not only is he valuable, but that his word matters and that he matters as well. So paying attention to what his duties are will tell you at all times that he loves you, because his job is not to be an emotional marshmallow. Men simply are not built like that. That's not how we're hardwired. Men are not hardwired to be this emotional being. We're not. No matter how much you'd like us to be that way, we're simply not. Men are very pragmatic, very logical in how we function and move. We're very cost-benefit calculated individuals by nature. And with that being said, a lot of things that women do and how women respond is not how men respond, nor is it what men find interesting. For example, when you want to go to the mall, right? You want your husband or your man to go to the mall with you, right? You ever notice how uninterested he is? He doesn't want to go to the mall because he knows when you go to the mall, what you're going to do. You're going to go in one shoe store, to the next shoe store, to the next shoe store, to the next clothing store. You may touch Victoria's Secret. You're going to go all over the place. You're going to do things in that mall that he as a man probably would not do. And we don't stay in the mall that long. That's just a light example. But you see how bored he is, right? He's like bored stiff. In most cases, he'll find somewhere to sit down and just kind of let you go free, right? But he'll be wishing all along that he had stayed home. And while you're walking through the mall, you'll find him asking you things like, are you ready yet? Are you ready yet? He'll keep asking it, and it'll begin to irritate you, right? But if he acted as if he was excited to go see shoes, right? You'd probably be equally as excited. Why? Because these are things that excite women. So, do you want your man to be masculine sometimes or all the time? And I thought this was a serious but yet fun topic to talk about tonight, because I think if we look at it seriously, more serious than we have, we won't take it for granted. I will tell you straight out again from the beginning, we are not interested. not even a little bit, not even slightly, about conversations that you would find exciting when talking to your girlfriends. We don't. We ladies, we really don't want to hear it. Again, you sound like the teacher on the Peanuts. You remember when you watched the Peanuts? The teacher was talking. You never could hear exactly what she was saying. It just sounded like wah 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 wah. Well, that's kind of what you sound like when you're talking to your man as if you're talking to a female. He'll sit there out of courtesy and try his best to pretend that he's listening to you, but in reality, he's almost ready to fall sideways out of the chair he's sitting in. He really don't want to hear it. Start talking to your man like you're talking to a man and not a female. Start learning how you and him together to communicate on things that pertain to you guys, that pertain to you. You know, that's how you show, that's quality time when you have those kind of conversations. You know, communication outside of that really doesn't have a whole lot of value. Now, am I saying that you can't have small talk about things that are not serious at all? Of course you can. Of course you can. That's like candy. You can't eat it all the time. You have to eat it in moderation. That means those kind of conversations have to be in moderation also. You know, it's just like if he was a comedian, he liked to joke a lot. If he joked too much, how much would that irritate you? Why? Because that's bad communication. So everything has to be done in moderation. But I believe what needs to be done more often instead of in moderation is the conversations between you and him as it pertains to real life issues, real life subjects. I think that's extremely important, and you can never get enough of those kind of conversations. The other conversation, you can have them in moderation, you know. Everything doesn't have to be completely serious at all times. No, you can have some fun and be silly. I'll tell you myself, I'm probably silly as it gets. I love to make fun. I love to joke. I mean, I am a jokester. Anybody that tell you they know me, I'll have you laughing in a few minutes. It won't take that long. I love to laugh and I love to make things light. But I'm also very aware, and I have a keen sense of awareness to what needs to be said. When it needs to be said, those things are absolutely important. I have a keen sense of that, but I also have a keen sense of humor too as well. So it's good to be balanced to where you're not so tight, you know, where you're squeezing juice out of a dime. You know what I mean? But between you and your husband and you and your man, you want to understand that the conversations between you and him that are absolutely necessary to be had are had. And they're had to where you get to the end of the conversation with a resolution. Ladies, you can't sit quietly and stonewall your husband if he's talking to you where there is no back and forth communication. Because you know what that means? That means there is no communication. If there is no back and forth, there is no communication. A real communication is two people talking to one another, conversing back and forth. That's why it's called a conversation. That means two people are conversing one to the other. That's what makes it a conversation. Otherwise, it's just one person talking and the other person sitting there either not listening or stonewalling. And I'm a firm believer that this kind of problem in the black community and in our relationships is a direct result of emotional constipation or an emotional detachment, the inability to attach to anything emotionally. It could come from a lot of reasons. It could come from how you were raised. It can come from what you were taught as you were raised, or it could be simply inbred into you by way of giving yourself emotionally at times in your past and then finding yourself disappointed or hurt by it. So now you close up, you shut down. And what does that do for future relationships, which you've heard me talk about? You know, if you take old relationships into new relationships, it spells disaster. You can't get success out of a situation like that. A lot of cases, like you've heard me also say before, I believe therapy is paramount for the black community. And I believe therapy is necessary on both sides. Oh yeah. We need some therapy because don't look at therapy and stigmatize it the way it's stigmatized in the black community. Therapy is so stigmatized in the black community. Like, we really, really look down on the term therapy. I can relate to it personally because I used to look down on it myself. I used to think if a person needed therapy, something was wrong. Like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs or something, you know? That's what I used to think. I thought maybe it was, 5 cans short of a 6-pack. Your elevator didn't go all the way up. I was thinking all kinds of crazy stuff. But this is how we're taught to think about getting therapy. This is how we're programmed to believe getting help on the outside. This is what it means, that we are medically, psychologically impaired, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. Sometimes you need to sit down and take advice from an objective standpoint with someone that you don't know, who's going to give you an honest, sincere evaluation based on a series of questions, and then evaluate it based on those series of questions with the answers that you give. You can find out a lot of things about yourself, I believe, if we could just take advice from an objective standpoint. We may learn why we don't communicate properly. We may find out something about ourselves as it relates to why we stonewall, why we shut down, why when things get serious we close up. As opposed to open up, we close up. You know, as opposed to standing up, we shut down. That's something that happened to us psychologically, emotionally, that a lot of times therapy will expose and help us move forward to become the best versions of ourselves going into the future, right? I believe that. So that's what this conversation tonight was all about. Do you want your man to be masculine sometimes or all the time? And do you believe communication is important? Do you believe good, healthy communication is important? It would amaze you to know how many relationships that you see right now. They look happy on the outside when you see them, but they're like aliens in the house. They're like two passing bodies passing one another in the wind. There's literally no communication whatsoever. But when you see them in the public, they're all smiles and grins and holding hands and all this kind of stuff, you know? And then that's why you are so surprised later when you find out they're not together, because you never saw it coming. You're like, but they looked so happy when we saw them in the public. But they were always smiling when we saw them in the public. Yeah, they were. They were. But here's the problem. What goes on behind the closed doors is way more important than what you front and attempt to fool people who are in the public, because your job is really not to the public anyway. You don't owe the public anything where your relationship is concerned. You owe each other everything where your relationship is concerned, because again, it's about getting to the end of life, like you've always heard me say. It's about getting to the end of life, not the here and the now, not the right now, not the today. Today is important, but you have to concentrate on what's necessary today so that you can get to the end of life. You know, that's what makes it so very important. Concentrating on what you need to do today to get you to the end of life. Because I tell you something, you don't know what your body's going to do. I don't know what mine is going to do. But I know if I need an insulin shot, I need my wife to give me my insulin shot. Right? And if she needs an insulin shot, she needs me to give her an insulin shot. Right? This is the beauty of it all in getting to the end of life. This is what's so very important about getting our communication together right now. There is no end of life together if you don't get your communication correct. If you don't figure out where the deficiency lies in your communication. It's extremely important. It cannot be overlooked, and it can't be medicated with sex. You can't medicate it with intimacy and not deal with the intangible, which is your ability to communicate in a healthy way with one another. We are better together than we are apart. We just are. And I'll tell you something. I believe personally going forward into the future, and I'm not saying tomorrow, next week, or the next 5 years, but I believe these talking points as they are being had, they're being had now in a way we've never ever heard it. Just think, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you didn't hear these kind of conversations from no one. You didn't hear men in particular talking about the things that they want or what they feel or deemed important as it relates to a relationship or marriage or what they wanted in a wife. You didn't hear these kind of conversations. That's why I believe things are taking a turn. They are going to take a turn. I don't believe the same narrative will be had in the next 10 to 15 or 20 years. What I would say to you ladies, embrace it. Embrace it. Embrace it. I know sometimes it sounds a little abrasive, you know. Sometimes it sounds like it's being a little mean and all that kind of stuff, you know. Try to remove your emotions from it and try to get the lesson inside of the talking point, because there is something to be said. If the problem didn't exist, the talking points also would not exist. You don't need police unless there's an element of crime. If there were no such thing as fires, you wouldn't need a fire department. Everything happens because there's a need for it. These conversations and talking points are necessary, and they have come to birth because a problem truly exists amongst us as a people, and in particular in our relationships. These problems do exist. Somebody has to say it. Somebody has to talk about it. Somebody has to care about it enough to put themselves on the front line and sacrifice themselves, willing to say it regardless of the consequences and circumstances, regardless. Like I always said, I am that one. Why? Because I care about what I see when I look outside the front door. Our communication levels are horrible. I want the same outcomes for you, the same way I want them for myself and my own personal family. I want them for you as well. We have a saying that we used to say years ago: you want for your brother and your sister what you want for yourself. Well, what do you want for yourself? And whatever it is that you want for yourself, is it important enough for you to spread that same concern? I believe these talking points will make more impact when ladies, you ladies, the first teachers, you, the transfers of the culture, you, when you start having these conversations amongst yourselves, meaning you talking to each other, lady, woman to woman, about some of these talking points in your own way, in your own style, in the way that you want to say it, but begin saying it, I believe we're really going to see a turnaround so quickly, because you're talking to each other anyway, right? But what are you talking about, you know? And what has these conversations done to you as it relates to destroying your ability to communicate with each other effectively, in a healthy way, and more importantly, in your relationships? How has it affected you, in a negative or a positive? Has your ability to communicate become an asset to your husband or a liability? Are you strengthening the foundation of your relationship with your ability to communicate? Or is your foundation crumbling one piece at a time? Only time will tell. But you have to take focus on where you are as it relates to that. That's what you need to do. And again, I hope this helps somebody. You know, I tried to keep it light, you know, but I think it's heavier than me trying to keep it light. I believe the subject is a lot heavier. And I think many of you that are listening, either listening now while I'm doing a stream, or you are listening to this now in a replay, I believe that a lot of what I said, I believe it applies to you. You know why? Because I am you. I am the black community, just like you are the black community. And We are in relationships, just like you are in relationships. So I don't believe we're that much different. When it all boils down, I don't believe any of us are really that much different in terms of what we experience in the relationships that we have. We all have experienced something that's either identical or very close in similarity to what the next one has experienced. That's why I believe we can all get this kind of topic. I believe we can get all of these topics that I talk about in my streams if we would just get outside of our emotions and hear the talking point. That's it. We're better together than we are apart. If you believe that and you want that, then we'll hold true to the talking point and take it for what it's absolutely worth for each one of us as an individual. It'll mean something different to each one of us as an individual. It won't mean the same thing to one person as it means to the other. And to some, it may mean nothing. But with every decision we make, there is an outcome. There is an outcome. So with that being said, I hope this talking point tonight helped. Again, it's always coming from a good place. This is Let's Talk About It, and I am your host, Charles Chambliss. Love you. Want to see the good outcomes. Want to see the outcomes that you say you want, ladies, and we want to see the outcomes to us as well, where you are concerned, and that's the truth. So again, I look forward to seeing you all Wednesday on this same Let's Talk About It. I have another very interesting topic to talk to you about Wednesday. If you find value in this stream, tell somebody. You went to a good restaurant before, you ate and the food was good. What'd you do? You couldn't wait to tell somebody. And the restaurant didn't pay you, did they? No. How about when you went to the movies and you saw that good movie? You left the movie and you told somebody, didn't you? Yeah, but you didn't get no royalties from telling them. You know how many people went there? You benefit more by telling someone what I'm talking about in these talking points on a personal level, if you hold true to the talking point, and you'll help someone else at the same time. Is that not more beneficial than a restaurant? I think you'll get a bigger return than what a restaurant is going to give you, and I think you'll get a bigger return than what a movie theater is going to give you. So with that being said, I look forward to seeing you all on the stream this Wednesday at 8 p.m. Again, I'm your host, Charles Chambliss of Let's Talk About It. And thank you. We are out. Have a good night, folks.